Hi, so my name is Julie Butler. I am currently a postdoc at Stanford University. I graduated from LSU in 2019 with a PhD in biological sciences. Before that, I did my undergrad at Texas A&M, where I got dual degrees in biology and forensic science. I was awarded the GRFP way back in 2014, and I've been helping out with these workshops every year since then. They were a huge help for me when I was applying, and so I hope that they'll also be a huge help for you. So describe the basic process that you used when applying for the fellowship. During my senior year of undergrad, I had a professor that strongly encouraged me to apply for the GRFP. He knew me from classes and research and knew that I was applying to grad schools, and he thought that I had a good shot at getting it. So I started working on my application. I had this idea of what schools I wanted to go to, and so I tried picking one, and I tried picking a project and contacting them. And I basically had this little mini quarter life crisis because I couldn't make that big of a decision about my future. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I started questioning if I was even good enough to go to grad school, good enough to apply for the GRFP. And so I just stopped and I didn't apply. I did obviously go to grad school. And during my first year of my PhD, I told her that I wanted to apply for the GRFP. And she laughed at me. I already had a fellowship and it seemed like a lot of work for money that we didn't really need. But I argued that it would be good experience writing this grant and that it'd be good to think through my project this early. And so when she realized I was serious, we started talking through project ideas. This was probably early September. And so in reality, it was actually really hard to come up with a project idea that early in my PhD. I'd been at LSU like 2 weeks, maybe at that point. But it also was really helpful for me to come up with a potential research plan that early in my PhD and to start to think through what I wanted to do. I worked with my advisor on the research statement, and we talked a lot about what types of research I was interested in, but also what would be fundable by NSF, what would be interesting to NSF, and what could fit easily into a 2-page research statement. I also contacted a lot of friends that had previously applied for the GRFP, especially friends that had been awarded it the previous year, and asked if I could see their essays. And this was really helpful because even though they had a different format, it switched from 3 essays to 2 essays, and they were in different fields, it was really helpful to see what was successful across different fields for things like formatting. I had drafts of my 2 essays done about a month before the due date. And this allowed me plenty of time to get feedback. And so I got feedback from pretty much everyone I could. I specifically sought out faculty that had served on GRFP review panels in the past. And so I just cold emailed people within my department at LSU and at my undergrad university, and just asked if they would have a little bit of time to read my essays and offer any just broad feedback. I also asked people in my department, other grad students, and even friends and other grad students in other departments if they could read my essays and give any feedback. And honestly, some of the best feedback I got was from people in humanities and English because they were able to read the essays and the application for things like grammar and flow and just whether or not it was something good and easy to read. Once I got all of this feedback, I worked with my PhD advisor to get all of it edited into a final version. And then we went back and forth with another professor in my department, talking through what was good and how it looked. We got it submitted a couple days before the deadline. And then I took the weekend off and went to the beach because I felt successful for having applied. So fellowships are extremely competitive. What did you do to make your application stand out, and why do you think you were selected? So when I applied, I honestly didn't think I had a shot at it. I had a pretty good GPA, but I came from a state school, and I was currently at a state school. And while I had a couple years of research experience, outside of my honors thesis, I didn't have any publications, and I had never attended or even presented at a scientific conference. My research skills were pretty basic, and I wasn't proposing to do anything fancy or cutting edge science. And so I just wasn't sure if I had a shot, both in terms of research and personal qualities. But in reality, I think I got the GRFP because of my personal statement. I had a lot of experience working with students. I was a resident advisor all through college, and I worked new student conferences. And I was trained in a lot of like people skills areas, and I had experience in community engagement, outreach, student support, and teaching. And so I used those to my advantage. I talked about how I was good with people and how I could communicate my studies with people of different backgrounds and learning styles. I also talked about how I could work with community members to enhance science dissemination. And since Louisiana is one of the worst states in terms of science literacy, I was able to use these like soft people skills to my advantage for this community engagement. My proposed research was also directly relevant to Louisiana, so I was able to emphasize how important these skills would be to my research and its impacts. Obviously, my research plan still had to stand up to their test, but in reality, the feedback was kind of mixed on my research plan. One reviewer said that it wasn't feasible, and one said that it was too ambitious and probably wouldn't work. But I also offered these alternative strategies for if it didn't work, here's what I wanted to do. And I also had a tiny bit of preliminary data that added some credit to the feasibility of the project. And both reviewers commented that the preliminary data was really helpful. But again, I really don't think my research statement did me any favors. I think a lot of it was my personal statement and being able to leverage my skills and my story to my advantage. And so this kind of goes into the what advice do you have? When I was applying, one of the biggest pieces of advice was that every person is different and everyone has their own unique story. And so finding a way to use your story, your experiences, your background to your advantage to set yourself apart in both your personal statement and your research statement. And so for me, that looked like explaining how I came from an extremely Christian family that discouraged any participation in science, how I was forced into cheerleading and dance and wearing tutus when in reality, I wanted to go collect bugs and play with Legos. And so I talked about how it was so important for me to be able to find mentors and to have community support within science, and how I wanted to do that for next generations. And so I talked about outreach and why outreach and working with students is so important to me. And that's one of the big parts of that broadening participation that NSF uses for criteria and judging applications. And so I think that really helped me. This professor also said that he told me every person that is applying for this is going to have a decent research statement. They're all going to have research experience. And so what is it that you have in addition to that? Because don't plan on just pitting yourself against people based on the research. You have to leverage yourself in some other way that is going to supplement the research. The other big piece of advice that I have is really just do it. If you're uncertain or unsure or questioning yourself, you're not alone. I've worked with lots of students on GRFP applications over the years, and almost every single one of them has been convinced that they wouldn't get it, or was worried that they didn't know what they were doing, that they weren't qualified, that they were trying to write a statement, but they weren't sure that's what they actually wanted to do with their research, or that was where they wanted to go. And had the same like little crisis that I did and made them question themselves and their future. And I think it's really important to remember that this fellowship funds you. It's not funding the research. You can go elsewhere. You can do other things. In reality, I probably did less than 30% of what I proposed in my GRFP. And so that's something that's kind of reassuring, is knowing that you don't have to do exactly what you propose. You're going to get the funding anyway, as long as you are staying in science and they're supporting you and you're being productive. Some of the other like random advice that I've gotten over time from writing grants or while I was writing the GRFP, was to think through your grant as a story. Think about the research that you're doing and how it fits into a broader impact, how it fits into a story. Why do these people care? What impact does this have on them? And why should they fund this money? And why should they fund you? One of the other, so I also got a lot of like little pointers while I was applying, and I'm gonna kind of list some of them. They're probably super redundant with advice you've already gotten, so I apologize in advance. But here's things to me that I find really important when writing grants. One of the big ones is be nice to your reviewers. Don't use jargon. Leave plenty of white space and even have a figure, even if it's just a conceptual figure. Reviewers don't want to open up to 5 pages of straight text. You need to have white space in there, and don't be afraid to underline or bold or italicize things to show that they're important. I also had a professor tell me that it's okay and kind of expected and good to be redundant. He said, tell them what you're going to tell them, tell it to them, and then tell them what you just told them, just to make sure that you get your point across and that you're explaining why it matters and why it's important. For the research sections, I also was, I got positive feedback saying that having unexpected outcomes or potential pitfalls about what could go wrong in your research, as well as alternative strategies for your proposed work, goes a long way in showing that you actually understand what you're proposing to do. You're not just listing these random techniques and this question that you want to do, but you've actually thought through what this data would tell you, how you're going to analyze it, and if it doesn't work, where things went wrong and what you can do instead of what you were doing. And then the last random piece of advice that I got was, if possible, have a way to tie your 2 essays together. Have a little broader impacts and intellectual merit section at the end of your research statement that is somehow going to tie into your personal statement. That's not always possible, but if it is, use it to your advantage. So finally, is there anything else you'd like to share? I think the big thing is just to have fun in writing it. And that probably sounds super cliche and dumb, but if you're genuinely excited about what you're proposing to do, it'll come across in your writing. And they want to fund something that is creative and fun and that you genuinely are enthusiastic about. Don't worry about it being this ridiculously technical document. They need to be able to read it and understand it and enjoy reading and understanding it. And that'll come across even more if you're also enjoying writing it. And so try not to get in your head and get too stressed. Don't think about don't think about the future with it. Like I said this earlier, but you don't have to do exactly what you're proposing to do. They are funding you, not your research plan. And so dream big or dream little. Just propose something that is technically sound, and have fun writing it. Yeah, I think that's it. Good luck. I'm sure you'll do great. These workshops are a huge help in writing your essays. And so I really encourage you to talk to the facilitators of these workshops. Mary Beth is amazing. But also talk to other workshop participants. Talk to other graduate students in your programs or in programs across LSU, and offer to trade applications and get feedback, because every opportunity for feedback can be really helpful. So good luck.